I didn't know a beige envelope could tilt a whole street against you. She, as the HOA president, gave me 14 days and called my fence a public nuisance. Her binder said uniformity, her eyes said comply. So I did what auditors do. I filed a stay, printed the clauses, and repaired every crack with glow-in-the-dark epoxy. Flush passive, boringly legal, so at night the edge would show and her rulebook would blink. Let me take you back to the evening that seam first lit up and the neighborhood chose sides. The envelope was wedged in the metal mouth of our mailbox, beige and stiff, like a tongue depressor somebody meant to gag me with. Final notice shouted through the window in the paper. "Scout heel," I said, even though the dog was already sitting. He cocked his head. "We're about to be very civilized," I added, and tore the flap. Inside was the sterile sermon per Bylaw 7, Section 4A, repair within 14 days, uniform safe condition, subject to lien. The words were so clean they squeaked. "You have got to be kidding me," I said to the street, which had the decency not to answer. I took the letter up the walk past the fence that had apparently joined the criminal class. The cedar slats were weathered silver. One panel showed a hairline crack near the post, too thinner than a pencil line, one with a sliver missing ugly to the right eyes. Yes? Dangerous, like a paper cut, is a guillotine. What's that Eden called from the kitchen? The house smelled like her dark roast and the citrus cleaner she liked because it made the counters shine like reasoning. "A love letter from civilization," I said, holding the page up. "They want the fence repaired in 14 days, or they start writing in scarier fonts." She wiped her hands on a towel and read brows knitting. "Just patch it, Merce. Home Depot, 30 minutes. 30 minutes for a lifetime of beige," I said. "Also, final notice." There was no first notice. Maybe the first was lost. Maybe they're innovating chronology. Scout nosed my knee and sneezed the universal sign for "this is not about treats." I grabbed my grandfather's folding wooden rule from the junk drawer, the old Stanley with brass joints, and stepped back outside. The morning was a clean sheet, trimmed lawns, a pickup coughing 2 streets over someone's wind chimes dinging like a polite doorbell. I extended the rule along the largest crack. The hinge clicked every 6 inches, a small ceremony. "1/4 inch is the limit," I said. "Who decides what's straight enough?" Engineers Eden said, joining me on the porch with her mug. "And occasionally committees. I've been an auditor for steel beams that hold up stadiums," I said. "Now I'm auditing cedar. Or you could buy a tube of patch." I crouched, set the rule's brass lip on the slat, and squinted. 3/16 here, maybe a hair more. I slid the joint outward, the wood warm from the sun. "But look, the post is plumb. The soil's firm. Mercer," she said gently, "you'll still be right after you patch it. And I'll still be wrong to them next time it's the gate latch or the mailbox color or the angle of our welcome mat." She sipped, watching me measure. "Then appeal. You love a good appeal. Appeals are Chapter 2, I said. Chapter 1 is a fence that refuses to apologize." The letter crackled when I folded it. I swear it enjoyed that. Across the street, a garage door rattled up. Mrs. Dalrymple waved her Sunday paper like a truce flag. "Morning, Mercer." "Morning," I called back. "Everything all right?" "Depends on how you feel about 90-degree angles," I said. She nodded as if that were a normal sentence and retreated. I counted off the hairline by the post again for the satisfaction of numbers. The cracking wasn't random freeze-thaw, a minor heave a winter ago, this soil speaking its tired syllables. I could already hear the meeting where someone mispronounced granular and made it sound like a sin. Back inside, I set the final notice on my desk, the beige flat against my keyboard. The printer's little light blinked like it was judging me too. I turned the page over. On top, Maple Hollow Estates Architectural Control Committee. It might as well have said, "Abandon individuality, all ye who enter." "What's the deadline?" Eden called. 14 days from the date of the letter, I said. I checked the postage, which by the way was 2 days before it was postmarked, so either the mail traveled backward through time or they're precognitive. "So you have 12 days, she said, infuriatingly practical. "I can pick up patch on my way back from the office. Let me at least look at the panel from the yard side," I said. "If the crack is only in the weather face, I can scarf in a slip glue clamp paint." "Or patch," Eden said. "Or patch," I echoed. Scout followed me along the side yard, his nails clicking on the concrete like a metronome for my irritation. I set the rule again now from the neighbor's view, careful not to step on the sedum that climbed like green pebbles at the base. The rule's joints glinted. I flipped to the fine print of the letter and read aloud my auditor voice, flat as an affidavit. "Remedy must be smooth, uncracked, and uniformly safe condition. See, Eden said. Uniformly safe. Patch is uniform. Uniform to what I said. Uniform to the idea that everything must look like a brochure photo forever. She leaned on the fence and it didn't move. Bless it. I'm not trying to win an argument, Merce. I'm trying to keep you from getting an ulcer over cedar. It isn't cedar, it's jurisdiction. And there it is, she said, smiling. I looked at the crack again and felt the smallest click somewhere inside me, like the rule finding its notch. What if I comply and also refuse to comply, meaning I do exactly what they ask, but somehow it remains ours? We're not painting it neon, she said. Good, because neon fades, I said. She laughed, despite herself. You're impossible. I'm audited. We went back in. The letter followed heavy as a dull conscience. I slid it under a paperweight, a brass surveyor's compass my father had given me when I was 22, and thought drawings were the same as reality. The compass ticked the glass softly as it settled, as if marking north toward inevitable meetings. What's your plan? Eden asked. Plan is to read their bylaws until they accidentally say what I need them to say. I said, opening the laptop. Then I'll make the fence safer than any fence has been in the history of fences. That's a lot of fence, she said. The safest, I said. And if you don't find a loophole, then I'll find a seam, I said. Everything built has one. The cursor blinked in a search bar. I typed Maple Hollow Estates Bylaw 7, Section 4A, and hit Enter. PDFs rose up that familiar carpet of legalese. I dragged the letter closer. Its beige made my white desk look dirty. The page smelled like a copy room that never met a window. Scout thumped his tail under my chair, a metronome set to "You're Still Home." Read me the exact line again, Eden said, settling at the edge of the desk. I read, careful, counting commas. All homeowner-maintained fences must be kept in a smooth, uncracked, and uniformly safe condition. I looked at her. Nothing about the method, nothing about color, nothing about material. Method matters if it fails, she said. But, fine. Yes, there's daylight. Enough to see by, I said. She put her hand on my shoulder. Promise me one thing, auditor man. If this turns into more than a weekend project, you'll let me buy the patch and we'll call it. If it turns into a crusade, you have full marital veto, I said. Good, she said. Because I like living here. Me too, I said. I took the rule again and walked out for one more look. When the brass hinge kissed the wood, the tiny click sounded like a lock turning somewhere I couldn't tell if in my head or the neighborhood. Scout sat patient as a clerk. I lined the edge. The numbers made their calm argument. I could follow them or not, but I would not be bullied by beige. I snapped the rule shut. This isn't about cracks, I told Scout. It's about control. He sneezed, which I took as parliamentary support. Back at the desk, I placed the final notice dead center under the lamp. The paper reflected the bulb in a weak halo, smug as a parking citation. All right, I said to it as if the committee were listening from inside the fiber. Let's see what uniformly safe really looks like. By July, the rumor had grown legs, then knees, then sensible walking shoes. At the mailbox cluster, I heard it in a stage whisper that wasn't meant to be private. Mercer's fence is a nuisance, a voice said, not quite facing me. Sets a precedent. For what splinters? I asked, smiling as if we were talking about zucchini. The woman blinked, then arranged her features into neighborly neutrality. Just, bylaws. I carried the circulars home like a reluctant bouquet. On top sat the HOA newsletter printed in grayscale to save ink, the tone grayscale to save joy. A bolded bullet read, Safety and visibility homeowner responsibilities include maintaining uniform safe fencing and adequate pathway visibility. There was even a clip art light bulb. Uniform safe and visible, I said aloud. They're mixing oranges and caution tape. In the garage, the fan pushed hot air from one corner to another. The space was half laboratory, half heap. The smell of sawdust elbowing the smell of engine oil, boxes of holiday lights flirting with clamps and a respirator mask. I spread the newsletter on the workbench, weighting its corners with a socket wrench and a tin of deck screws. The little ink bulb stared at me. Eden stepped in still in her office flats, a curl stuck to her forehead with sweat. She lifted an ADA handbook from her tote, flipped with the efficiency of a person who has lived inside footnotes, and tapped a highlighted section. Wayfinding features, she said. Photoluminescent markings for egress stairs paths. See, they care about visibility too. That's interior code, I said. Principle still applies, she said. You always tell me principles are portable. I do enjoy hearing my better lines back, I said, taking the book. The fluorescent overhead flickered obligingly as if to underline photoluminescent. If the goal is uniformly safe and visible, who says the safe thing can't be visible on its own, no lamppost required? She lifted a brow. We're not installing runway lights. No. I put the handbook next to the newsletter. The two documents looked like cousins that didn't speak at reunions. But maybe we borrow a trick from the airport. Mercer, she said in the tone that meant both go on, and this is how we end up with a drum kit in the living room. I pulled a dog-eared folder from the shelf, old notes from a project where I'd audited a stadium's egress path coatings. There's glow powder, strontium aluminate, mix it into clear resin. It charges under sunlight, glows for hours in the dark. No wiring, no trip hazard, zero power. And the fence, I fill the cracks. Smooth, uncracked, uniformly safe. And at night, Mercer, she said, covering a smile, you're about to sell me a magic fence. A compliant magic fence, I said. Tom Carver's head appeared in the open side door like a prairie dog's cap backward. You folks got a minute, Tom, I said. Come in. Ignore the lab. He stepped over a coil of extension cord. We, heard some talk at the pool committee. Thought you should know. They're saying the board'll fine you if you don't fix it exactly their way. They can fine me for blinking too slow, I said. But if I meet the letter, they'll write a new letter, Tom said. Still, if you need a hand, I got clamps, and my brother knows a guy who does epoxy floors at the hockey rink. I might ask for the guy's number, I said. For research. Eden showed him the highlighted ADA paragraph. Tom squinted. Huh. So, like those glow stripes on stairs. Cousins, I said. Second cousins with good manners. He whistled. Neighbors'll talk if it glows. Neighbors talk when a raccoon sneezes, I said. Tom laughed, patted the door jamb. Holler if you need me. He vanished the way he'd come, a friendly ghost. I opened the laptop on the bench and Googled resin like a man studying for an exam he wished he could skip. Videos rolled river tables pouring like neon creeks, keychains you could find with the lights off. I took notes, mixed ratios Pot Life recommended, aggregate sizes. I looked up the IBC cross-references. Eden handed me a yellow highlighter like a baton. If you do this, she said, we do it slow, small, and we test it. Slow, small, test. I repeated the way one repeats vows. The fan ticked as it pivoted. I found a supplier that sold glow powder in unromantic plastic jars. Colors had names like Aqua Night and Cosmic. I clicked Aqua. It felt responsible. Order placed, I said. How much Eden asked a hand already traveling toward her temple. Enough for a few cracks, I said, and a few mistakes. So, 3 jars. I looked at the screen. 5. She exhaled through her nose. Okay. The second we cross into art installation, I'm pulling the plug. This is infrastructure, I said solemnly. 2 days later, the doorbell went ding with the precise cheerfulness of a cartoon. A small pyramid of boxes waited on the porch. Scout sniffed them like we'd mail-ordered a new dog. In the garage, I laid out a piece of cedar scrap, sanded smooth until it felt like a well-worn pencil. I taped off a thin channel to mimic a crack the blue painter's tape like delicate gutters. On the bench, 2-part clear epoxy, labeled in fonts that screamed respect me. A stirring stick, disposable cup, nitrile, gloves. I opened a jar of glow powder. It looked like laundry detergent that had dreams. Safety first, Eden said, handing me the respirator like a chalice. Mix slow, or you'll bake bubbles in. Spoken like a geotech who has watched concrete betray men, I said muffled. I poured part A, honey thick, part B, a thinner sister. I stirred slow figure 8s, then dusted in the powder. The mixture turned a milky sea glass tint like a tide remembering something. We poured into the taped channel. The resin settled obediently, leveling itself with the smugness of a person who has never tripped. I teased it with a toothpick, coaxing it to the edges. Eden set the scrap under the shop light, and we waited the way people wait by hospital doors pretending they're reading. How long, she asked. A few hours to set, I said. Full cure tomorrow. But the glow. We killed the shop light and stood in the dim. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then slowly, a shy line awoke. It wasn't a flashlight or a taunt. It was a soft memory, blue-green, the kind you see on the inside of your eyelids when you've looked at the ocean too long. Scout startled barking once high and incredulous. He nosed the bench leg, then sat head cocked as if the board might now speak. Easy, Professor, I said, scratching his ear. It's science. Eden leaned in, eyes reflecting the faint light. "It's pretty," she admitted. "It's compliant," I said. "Smooth, uncracked, uniformly safe, and visible. At night, you'll see it from the street," she said. "Marla will see it. At night, you can also see stars," I said. "We haven't found Orion?" She snorted. "Don't give them ideas." The fan ticked and kept sweeping the heat around like a bored usher. I peeled the tape once the resin had skinned, leaving a clean edge. The glow line lay there like the suggestion of a path or a seam where two arguments met. "This is the small test," I said. "We watch for yellowing, brittleness, adhesion. If it holds, we graduate to the fence." "And we read the bylaws again," Eden said, tapping the newsletter. "Then the ADA bit. Then back again. Round and round," I said, "until the loophole isn't a hole. It's a door they forgot they built." She watched Scout sniff the board and decided not to lick it. "Tom's right, you know. Neighbors will talk. Then let them talk about safety," I said. "Let the gossip have to learn a new word." I clicked open a document and typed out a paragraph that sounded like a love letter to common sense. Proposed repair method: 2-part epoxy. Resin with photoluminescent filler used as crack filler to achieve smooth, uncracked, uniformly safe condition enhancing nocturnal visibility per analogous ADA/IBC principles. I printed it and slid it beside the highlighted handbook page. Artifacts, assemble. The doorbell dinged again. Another stack of boxes, somehow taller this time, blotted the threshold. The label read like a warning to anyone with taste aquanite: photoluminescent powder. Eden folded her arms, the universal gesture for spouse audit. "How many did you order after 5 only?" I squinted at the receipt. "Several more." She sighed, not unkindly, the sound a careful bridge between skepticism and fondness. "Mercer, don't turn this into a crusade." I looked at the faintly glowing strip on the bench, at the newsletter's bossy bullet, at the highlighted ADA lines. The fan breathed the warm garage air across my neck. "Not a crusade," I said. "A correction." The city library smelled like patience. Old paper carpet cleaner, the faint sugar of someone's contraband cough drop. I had a stack of municipal code printouts splayed across a study table and a whisper that wasn't as quiet as I thought. Uniformly safe to whom I hissed at a paragraph. The gods of clipboards. A hand set a thin cream-colored form on my top page. "You're reading that wrong," a voice said. I looked up into gray eyes and a posture that had long ago decided every line should be straight. "You're skipping the process that makes the paragraph matter, and you are Ruth Calder." "I used to be city clerk," she said. "Now I correct strangers in libraries." I smiled, despite myself. Mercer Hale, homeowner, fence owner, reluctant legal anthropologist. She tapped the form with a pen whose click sounded like a small gavel. "Inspection request, exterior. Safety feature. You want your resin idea treated seriously, file this with Public Works. Then place a comment on the agenda. They can't ignore paper with a tracking number." "You heard me muttering resin," I said. "I heard loophole," she said. "And those are only respectable when they're also procedure." Eden slid into the chair beside me, eyebrows doing their yes, but dance. "Hello," she said to Ruth. "He's harmless. Mostly. He's dangerous without a form," Ruth said, and handed me her pen. I read the boxes. "Name, address, description of proposed safety feature." My hand hovered. "Describe it like you're the most boring person alive," Ruth said. "Bureaucracy respects uninteresting sentences." "I can do that," I said. I was born for that. I wrote 2-part epoxy crack filler with photoluminescent additive for nighttime visibility. No projection, no power flush to surface. Trip hazard mitigated. My letters got smaller the longer the line got. Ruth watched, satisfied. "You'll also want a date for public comment. 3rd Thursdays. Speak for 2 minutes. Bring a photo of what I asked. The idea, the thing she said. Do a small section. Show it's not radioactive. Show it's not a strobe. Children are persuasive. Adults with clipboards used to be children." Through the glass wall we saw her Marla crossing the plaza outside, visor-low clipboard, hugged like a hymnal. She didn't see us. Or she did and pretended not to. That her Ruth asked. "That's her," I said. Ruth's pen clicked again. "Then be kinder than she expects and more prepared than she can handle." We thanked her, and I half whispered, half prayed. "Do I owe you coffee?" "You owe me a filed form," Ruth said, standing. "And legible attachments." Back home, the fluorescent hum of the library followed me in my ears like a mantra. I laid the form on the kitchen island, smoothed it with the side of my hand. Eden found a manila folder and labeled it in block letters, "Fence Safety Feature." Scout parked himself at my feet, a deposition with fur. "Small section," I said. "Boring sentences," Eden said. At dusk, I masked a finger-wide crack on the inside face of the fence where the cedar had split shyly along the grain. The powder and resin waited on the workbench like accomplices. I mixed slow. Eden held the shop light close. The glow was an idea now. Not a spectacle. A narrow seam poured with care coaxed to level with a tongue depressor, air bubbles teased out like impossible thoughts. We sat on the back step and watched the evening take color away. When the dark gathered enough nerve, the seam answered. It wasn't a shout. It was a quiet blue-green admission, "I am here if you need me." "It's gentle," Eden said. "Gentle is a compliance strategy," I said. The Carver kids drifted through the gate with their mother's permission, Nora with her pigtails and Zach with his dinosaur pajamas because bedtime was always a negotiation. "What's that?" Nora asked, hands on knees. "A night line," I said. "It helps you see the fence." Zach traced it with one finger, then looked at his glowing finger like he'd touched the moon. "Cool," he whispered, suddenly protective. "Don't touch your eyes," Eden said automatically. "Can we show Mom?" Nora asked. "Take a picture," I said. "No flash. It likes to be shy." Their mother posed the two of them in the soft glow. She mouthed thank you at us over their heads. On the kitchen table, the library form sat with the pen on top like a promise. Midway through this first experiment, the front door thunked mail drop. That was odd, late for the carrier. I patted down the hall and found a red-edged envelope on the mat, certified mail, shouting from its chest. My stomach did that small ridiculous somersault it reserves for ghosts and taxes. "You want me to open it?" Eden asked. "No." My fingers weren't cooperating, so I used the letter opener like a surgeon. Inside, notice of nuisance. Fine, $500. A paragraph of HOA, throat clearing, then the phrasing they liked because it sounded like a magic spell. Creation of a public nuisance by unapproved aesthetic modification. The letters were as thick as a fence post. "That was fast," Eden said softly. "Faster than the mail service," I said. The paper shook once in my hand. I put it flat on the table next to Ruth's form, red kissing cream. "They fined us before the hearing," I said, before I even filed. Or someone reported the kids at the fence, Eden said, eyes on the window where two small silhouettes traced a line like astronomers. Marla monitors the chat. The fan on the fridge kicked on with a hum that sounded exactly like the library's lights. I took a breath that felt like a measurement. "This is good," I said. "I'm sorry," what Eden stared. "A fine means there's a process to fight the fine," I said. "Ruth gave us the rote. Now we have a docket number and something to thread through it. You just turned $500 into optimism," she said. "I turned it into paperwork," I said. "Paperwork and an experiment children like." I signed the inspection request, the pen nib digging a hair into the paper because my hand still buzzed. I made a copy and slid both into the folder. I slipped the fine into a clear sleeve as if clarity would rub off. "What do we say?" at public comment, Eden asked, leaning her hip on the island. "We say smooth, uncracked, uniformly safe," I said. "We say no flashing, no tripping, no wiring. We say at night edges are where accidents happen and this makes the edge polite." "Polite edges," she said, a half laugh. "You should trademark that." I took the red notice and slapped it gently on the table to square its corners. The sound was louder than it should have been. My heart stuttered in my ears like it wanted the last word. "Okay," Eden said, reading my face. "Sit. Breathe. We'll figure the appeal deadlines in the morning." "No," I said, and folded the certified mail envelope into the folder as if it too could be evidence of our reasonableness. "Tonight, I want to watch the line glow." We stepped back to the yard. Nora and Zach had been shepherded home. The fence seam made its small blue argument to the dark. Scout settled at my feet, sighing like a tired juror. Eden put a palm on my shoulder. "You know this is bigger than a crack now, right?" "I know," I said. She looked at the jars on the workbench, the form on the table, the red notice catching lamplight. "You've just declared war with a bucket of resin." Rain made the cul-de-sac look laminated. The cedar darkened to coffee, every bead of water marching down the grain like it had somewhere punctual to be. At dusk, the faint seam on the inside face of the fence answered the murk with a soft blue-green. Not a beacon, not a flare, just a reminder. Gary Loom's phone lens rose over the hedge like a periscope. "Hazardous glare," he narrated, which was funny because the only thing glaring was Gary. The screen threw a cold square across his cheekbones. Posting to the HOA chat, he added as if that carried the power of a court order. Evening, Gary. I kept my hands visible, palms open like I was approaching a nervous horse. It's not a strobe. It's a distraction, he said. Kids will think it's a slide. It's a line, I said. Lines are what you use to keep kids from sliding into things. He sniffed, filmed a little closer. Rain stippled his screen. His Pomeranian princess looked personally betrayed by the weather. A city Prius pulled up. Officer Wynn stepped out, the kind of officer whose uniform looked like it spent most of its day mediating trash can disputes. Someone reported a public light nuisance, he said, reading the phrasing off his phone with a wince. I am here to observe. Marla arrived, next visor, low clipboard zipped into a plastic sleeve. She didn't greet me. She greeted the fence as if it were the one who owed her an apology. We appreciate your prompt attention, officer, she said. The committee is concerned about uniformity and distractions. No one's cutting through traffic to stare at a fence, I said. Please allow the observation, Marla said to the air, which seemed to be how she addressed the general public. Wynn flicked his penlight along the seam. In the rain, the glow softened, almost swallowed like chalk in a puddle. Not flashing, he said. Not bright. He nudged the cedar with 2 fingers. The panel didn't complain. Feels stable. Gary zoomed. Get the part where it pulses. It doesn't pulse, I said. Your eyes do. It's an unapproved aesthetic, Marla said, as if the term itself paid taxes. It's a repair, I said. Smooth, uncracked, uniformly safe. You fined me for a nuisance. I filed an inspection request. I held up the cream form in its plastic sleeve. Raindrops purled on the surface and slid off, refusing to stick to procedure. We'll need measurements, Gary announced. Official ones. He produced a retractable metal tape like a magician with a single trick. I reached into my jacket and felt the comforting hinge of my grandfather's folding rule. I'd dried it with a towel. The brass joints had the dull glow of patience. I extended it along the slat, each click a little heartbeat. 3/16 at the widest. The wood is capped with resin. Angle it like that, and it's anything Gary said, and he pushed at the panel with the back of his hand, gentle at first, then harder the way people prove something by making it worse. Stop, I said. That's not a field condition. We must test structural integrity, he said, delighted to have combined all those syllables. Wynn stepped between us, hand up at about the level where things become regrettable. Sir, hands off the fence unless the homeowner agrees. I do not agree, I said. Marla, voice neutral. We simply need to confirm Mercer's measurements. The rain thickened a curtain of fine strings. My fingers slipped on the rule. I adjusted my grip. Gary made a show of bracing the panel for accuracy and gave it a little heel-of-the-hand shove. The cedar flexed. The rule took the force instead. The sound was small but ugly kirk, not a break, a shear. Brass joint hairline fracture. I caught the 2 halves before they fell into the mud. For a second, the old wood felt warm in my palm, like it remembered other hands and better uses. Oh, look, Gary said into his camera. Even his tool can't handle it. Marla wrote something in tidy, rain-proofed script. Noted distortion under light pressure. That's not what happened, I said too quickly, the way a person says a thing when he knows how it looks. Wynn exhaled the exhausted air of a man who has mediated a neighborhood argument about wind chimes. You all done pushing on things? We are, I said. We are, Marla echoed, which made it sound decided by committee. I'd like to add for the record, I said, that your fine arrived before the inspection request could even be docketed. I will appeal. Marla's visor tilted. You're welcome to pursue process. It came out like bless your heart for people who collect minutes. Gary turned the camera to himself. Community safety first, he intoned, rain, slicking his eyebrows into parentheses. The glow along the seam stayed gentle, almost embarrassed by the scene. Scout whined from the porch, then sat with his chin on his paws like a patient at the vet. Wynn capped his penlight. From a city perspective, he said carefully, I don't see a code violation. The lighting is passive. It's not projected. There's no immediate hazard. This seems like a civil matter. Thank you, Officer Marla said. We will address it internally. They left in a staggered parade. Wynn, in his Prius Gary, under a hood the size of a tent, Marla with her visor drawing a line through the wet. The rain quieted to a whisper. My hands shook in the leftover space people leave when they go. At the workbench, I set the 2 halves of the folding rule on a towel. The break was clean, right at the brass. It would take a careful pin and epoxy to make it honest again. I slid both pieces into a zip bag and pressed the seal the way people put keepsakes away while they think of better days. I looked at Scout. Evidence, I said, and tucked the bag into the file folder. The word steadied me. Inside, I made tea because coffee felt too combative. Steam fogged my glasses while I logged into the HOA portal to upload Ruth's inspection request as a PDF, the cursor blinking like an impatient witness. I added a line, "Please schedule site visit. Repair remains within bylaw language. Passive photoluminescence for nighttime visibility." I hit submit and heard the soft computer ding that always sounded like a clerk stamping something in a windowless room. The doorbell rang, once then, again an urgent ding-ding that didn't match any neighbor's manners. When I opened the door, a courier in a poncho handed me a stiff envelope with the telltale green card clipped to the front. Certified mail spread itself like a stain across the top. "Signature," he said. The rain misted into the hall. My name looked wobbly on his pad. At the kitchen island, I used the letter opener because my hands didn't trust themselves. The envelope surrendered a document on heavy stock that tried to smell like authority. Notice of mandatory remediation. It read in a font that had attended finishing school. Contractor scheduled for demolition of non-compliant fence section, Friday 9:00 a.m. Interference will result in further action. A second page, smaller. Notice of intent to lien. Water off my sleeves fell to the tile and spread like small continents. The paper trembled once in my grip, then steadied under my palm. I put it flat, the way you would a fevered forehead, and read the line again, intent to lien, as if repetition might change its meaning. The certified stamp sat in the corner like an accusation that had learned to print. I set the notice beside the broken rule bag, 2 quiet statements from the same afternoon. Out the window, the glow on the fence thinned and thinned until it was only a rumor against the rain. The Ford that pulled to the curb wore its dents like metals. When the engine cut, the morning quiet grew louder, sprinklers hissing a bird drilling the eaves dew stitched to every fence post like tiny glass buttons. The driver's door sighed open, and out came a man the size of a refrigerator that believed in work. He carried a sledgehammer with one hand the way most people carry a screwdriver. "Gus Ortega," he said, squinting at the fence seam that held last night's moonlight like a memory. "Lady told me it's a hazardous spill." My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Ruth file A stay before they touch it. Paper first." I thumbed back a working on it and slid the phone away. The other thing in that pocket was the broken folding rule zip-bagged edges smooth from 100 uses now split like a sentence mid-phrase. "You, the homeowner?" Gus asked. "Mercer," I said. "And yep, that's my hazardous spill." He grinned, sledgehammer head resting against his shoulder. "You kidding? That line's just enough glow to find your elbow in the dark." He stepped closer, boots darkening the dew. "They hire me to bust this out," said non-compliant. Across the street a visor moved at the edge of a window. Marla pretending to water a plant that didn't exist. "Before you swing," I said, "hear the saga." I gave him the quick version, the beige, final notice, the ADA paragraph, the kids tracing the seam with their fingers, the $500 nuisance fine, the certified letter, threatening lien. I held up a manila folder. Inspection request filed. Public comment pending. Gus tipped the sledge down and looked at the fence like a doctor looks at a patient he already likes. "So, repair is smooth. Uncracked sits flush. No screws sticking out, no cables, no trip." "Exactly. And this spill glows like a dog's night collar." He chuckled. "All right." He knelt, thumb pressed to the resin seam. Hard. Clean edge. "Whoever mixed this went slow." "That would be me," I said. "Instruction by YouTube and terror." He laughed, a warm rumbling sound that sent a sparrow up from the hedge. "Lady told me on the phone you'd poured alien goo on the subdivision and children were losing their minds." "Children found it comforting," I said. "Adults, less so." He stood, rolling his shoulders. "What's with your pocket?" "You keep checking it like a talisman." I pulled the zip bag, showed him the fractured joint. My grandfather's rule. HOA broke the measurement and called it proof. Gus whistled softly. "That's a prop from a better time." He slipped the sledge to the grass. "Look, Mercer, this is not demolition. This is art, and safe art at that. Art contractors recognize craft when we see it," he said. He took out his phone, scrolled to a notes app, and typed with a surprisingly delicate thumb. He turned the screen so I could read on-site observation repair appears structurally sound. Epoxy, crack fill, flush with fence surface, passive photoluminescence, no hazard observed. Demolition not recommended under described scope. G. Ortega, CCB Sador, then a number. Email, he asked. I gave it. My phone dinged as the note landed. Evidence, JPG complete with muddy boot print at the bottom edge for flavor. You're refusing to swing, I asked. I'm refusing your board's scope, he said. You hired a concrete saw for a watercolor. This is outside demolition. If they want it gone, they need a different work order, a different insurance rider, and a crew that enjoys being unpopular. He lifted the phone again. Let's tell the visor. He hit speaker. The call rang twice. Marla, speaking, she said the words ironed. Morning. Ortega, here. On site with Mr. Hale, he said. This isn't a tear-out. It's a safety repair with a passive glow, outside my scope. I won't touch it without a signed change order and a liability rider. Silence. Then Gus, the committee expects compliance. Then comply with your own process, he said. Write a better ticket. We'll convene, she said, which always meant you won't like how. He ended the call and put the phone away. The sledge still lay in the wet grass, ridiculous and heavy. Gus picked it up only to lean it against my mailbox like a guest's umbrella. File that, stay, he said. Make it official before someone gets enthusiastic. Public Works. 3rd Thursday. 2 minutes bring a photo I recited, surprising myself with how ready the words were. He gave me a sideways look. You've been doing your homework. I had a tutor, I said. Former city clerk with a gavel for a pen. He grinned. Good tutor. He jerked his chin toward the visor window. She's steaming. She's steeping, I said. It brews into policy. Gus laughed again, a sound that did better for my nerves than the tea I'd been drinking since Chapter 1 of this whole absurdity. He walked the fence line, testing posts with a carpenter's push, listening the way some men listen to engines. You know what I see, he said. A violation of aesthetic uniformity, I said. I see a fix that's going to outlast 3 HOA presidents. He pointed to the seam. And a story neighborhood kids will remember longer than any meeting minutes. You have no idea how much I wanted to hear exactly that sentence I said. He wiped rain from his mustache with the back of his wrist and adjusted his hard hat like a crown. Then, ceremonially, he tipped it toward me. Paper first, Mercer. File the stay. I'll email my office to log non-performance for scope. If they try to bill you, you've got my note. You just turned a sledgehammer into an affidavit, I said. I aim to please, he said, and loaded the tool back into the Ford with a hollow ring. He climbed in, gave the horn a quick, friendly toot, and rumbled away. Dew jewels shook from the fence rail and fell into the grass like spent punctuation. Inside, I opened Ruth's text again and typed with both thumbs. Stay, request filing now, attaching contractor observation. She answered with a thumbs up and a tiny scale of justice emoji I didn't know she owned. I filled the form on the city portal request for stay of non-emergency remediation pending review. Description, parcel number, photos. I attached Gus's note and my own dull paragraph. The confirmation number popped up like a life preserver, ST 2022-117. I printed it and laid it in the manila folder. The broken rule bag went on top, the plastic crinkling like a quiet yes. By afternoon, a notice appeared on the HOA portal with a headline that tried to sound neutral. Special meeting, public hearing regarding fence repair method, Hale residence. Date, time, clubhouse address. Members encouraged to attend. Eden read it over my shoulder. They're escalating, she said. They're convening, I said. She slid a hand into my pocket, found the plastic bag, and squeezed the broken rule once like a superstition. We'll bring this. We'll bring everything, I said, looking at the screen where the words public hearing sat like a stage already lit. The Pine Hollow clubhouse was packed so tight the folding chairs had to breathe in. Every shift sent a small squeak across the carpet like mice. Someone had brewed coffee that smelled like cardboard courage. Fluorescent lights hummed a single note overhead. The mic popped whenever a lip got too close. I took a chair near the aisle notes in my lap, the broken folding rule in my pocket like a stub of luck. Eden laid a stack of glossy photos across the table between us. Children's hands glowed faintly where they'd traced the seam on my fence. If they'll look, she whispered, these will do half your speech. Ruth slipped in late back row, 2 fingers raised in a minimalist hello. She had a legal pad and no expression support as discipline. Marla stood at the podium visor, barely removed indoors, binder open like a hymnal. Order, she said, and the room tried. A volunteer secretary pressed a red record button. The tiny device answered with a beep that sounded like it wanted to testify. Marla began with a slide, the importance of aesthetic uniformity. A line chart swooped as if it had somewhere dramatic to be. Non-standard elements reduce perceived order, she said, clicking to a photo of a lawn gnome, elsewhere, a mailbox that had sinned by being whimsical. We've seen property values decline. Citation, someone called. Public comment later, she said, and smiled in a way that didn't invite it. The mic popped. The coffee steamed. She flicked to a photo of my fence at dusk. The seam was a soft thread, nothing more. Unapproved aesthetic modification, she read, and the words were pleased to hear themselves aloud. I felt my knee start its drummer boy routine. Eden tapped it once steady. "We propose Amendment 14B, Marla said. The secretary repeated it like a spell. Approved repair materials. Gray concrete patch or mortar mix. Prohibited luminescent reflective scintillating. Scintillating, someone near the back said, half laugh, half curse. A chuckle rippled, then died. We will hear the homeowner, Marla said, not looking at me. 2 minutes. When I stood, the chair hiccuped against the carpet. I carried my notes up like they were a small animal that needed gentleness. At the podium, the mic was too close. It kissed my breath with a pop. I stepped it back and found the red dot of the recorder. It blinked patient. Our bylaws say I began voice smaller than the room fences must be kept in a smooth, uncracked, and uniformly safe condition. Later, the transcript would carry those words like they belonged to the building. I held up a photo of the seam in daylight, nothing flashy, a healed line. I used a 2-part epoxy crack filler with a passive photoluminescent additive. It sits flush. No wiring, no trip hazard. At night, it glows just enough to show the edge. I slid Eden's photos onto the lectern. Children's hands on blue-green, a mother's thumbs up behind them. The room shifted. A chair squeaked like it agreed. The ADA and building codes use luminous wayfinding to keep people safe, I said, lifting a highlighted printout. Same principle outdoors. Marla stared at a point above my head. We are not an airport runway, she said for the record. No, I said. We're a neighborhood, and this helps at the edge where people trip. I clicked the next page in my folder, Gus's note on his phone header printed large enough to read from 3 rows. Independent contractor observation, I said. Repair appears structurally sound. Passive photoluminescence. No hazard observed. Demolition not recommended under scope. The mic made a soft smacking sound when I set it down. My 2 minutes felt like 90 seconds. Public comment, Marla declared, scanning the sign-up sheet. Tom Carver. Tom stepped up, cap in his hands like it had manners. Our kids play by that fence, he said. At night they can see it without a flashlight. They're safer. Seconded, said his wife from the front row. And it's pretty. We like it. Murmurs spread like warm water. Someone behind me whispered, It's a line, not Vegas. The secretary dutiful typed anyway. I felt the midroom sway toward something like permission. Then Gary Loom stood. Uniformity matters, he said into the mic like it had asked him personally. If one person glows, everyone will glow. Promises, promises. Someone muttered. The room laughed without looking at Marla to see if it could. The volunteer from Public Works Win in a polo tonight cleared his throat. From a city standpoint, he said we received a request for stay pending review. The feature is passive, no code issues identified at first inspection. He nodded at Ruth, who didn't nod back, which was her way of smiling. We will proceed to the vote, Marla said, binder louder than her voice when she shut it. Amendment 14B as proposed. Ballots traveled down rows, small squares of paper that hummed with larger consequences. Pens clicked. Eden handed me hers after she marked no, her eyebrow doing that little arch like a flag. I marked no and felt both childish and correct. The secretary fed ballots into a plastic sleeve. The hum of counting soft voices, the rasp of paper slid around the room. Fluorescents sang their single note. Someone coughed like punctuation. Ruth wrote something on her pad and underlined it twice. All in favor, Marla said. Hands rose like hesitant periscopes on the left side of the room. Gary's, Mrs. Dalrymple's, a few others. She counted lips moving. Opposed hands went up in a blur. The Carvers, Eden. Win, young couples, old men who'd built their own sheds. Even S from the hardware store had wandered in and lifted his hand like it was a wrench. The secretary whispered the numbers. Marla's jaw set. Amendment fails, she said. For a heartbeat, the room held itself still the way a lake holds its breath, and then the cheer went up. It wasn't loud, but it was decisive. A couple of chairs clapped by mistake. Someone slapped my shoulder. Eden exhaled a laugh that shook her photos. Marla slammed the binder. The mic popped a tiny thunderclap. She looked at me finally, and for the first time all summer I saw something behind the visor stance. Defeat, yes, but threaded with an older sorrow, the kind you don't argue with in public because it's not about offense. I sat down, hands useless on my knees. The coffee tasted like victory at room temperature. Ruth slid along the back row until she could brush my elbow on her way out, a benediction disguised as traffic. "Be gracious," she murmured. "The process is done. People remain." I nodded, but my eyes were still on Marla's. There was a story there that hadn't been told, and it stared at me across the fluorescent hum. By late summer, the cul-de-sac had forgiven itself. Somebody dragged 2 grills to the mouth of the circle lids, yawning like polite crocodiles. Smoke threaded the still air and gathered under the maples before slipping away. Paper lanterns blinked awake one by one in the blue hour. The fence. My fence held its line at the edge of the lawn, just another backdrop for tag and spilled lemonade and a ball that didn't quite make it to the curb. Ruth arrived as if she'd never been gone, a paper plate in one hand and a legal pad in the other. She speared a baked bean with a fork and chewed like she was considering testimony. Then she sat on the low retaining wall, smoothed a napkin across her knee, and began writing on it with a pen that had written more rules than most of us had ever read. "You need a guideline," she said without preface. "Something they can adopt so the next person doesn't have to reinvent your hearing." I thought the hearing was the guideline, I said, easing down beside her. The grill clicked as fat found the coals. A row of hot dogs turned into modest fireworks. "Hearings are storms," she said. "Guidelines are weather." She wrote in small square letters that looked like they might stand up in court by themselves. "Passive photoluminescent crack repair may be used to meet smooth, uncracked, uniformly safe, where one material sits flush. 2. No flashing or projection. 3. No tripping hazard. 4. No color change coatings on whole panels. 5. Visibility intended as wayfinding at night." Eden wandered over with a red cup and her engineer's eyebrows. "You two are incapable of not drafting at a party," she said, handing me the cup. The lemonade had the exact bite of store-bought compromise. "We're removing friction from the future," Ruth said. "Volunteers hate friction." Kids tore past Nora and Zach and 3 others I'd learned by first-name familiarity and last-name respect. They caromed off shadows and laughter, a constellation that rearranged itself without harm. The glow hadn't arrived yet. Dusk was still deciding. I looked around for Marla, out of habit. She wasn't here, or if she was, she'd taken the shape of a neighbor in a folding chair who didn't want to be noticed. The relief that washed through me felt almost impolite, a victory I hadn't fully allowed because it might jinx the niceness of a summer night. Eden read the napkin, lips moving. "Color change coatings to whole panel coatings," she said, "and add limited to crack infill, so they don't think you mean glowing murals." Ruth nodded and amended. "A good guideline tells you what it isn't," she said. "Otherwise, you end up arguing about dragons that aren't in the room." Tom Carver handed me a plate with a burger that slumped like a tired dog. "You're the keynote tonight," he said. "Our kids want you to make a speech." "My speeches come with transcripts and a 2-minute timer," I said. "Tonight I'm practicing brevity. You can just say thanks," he said, smiling. So I did to the circle at large, watching faces turn in the soft light, the young couple who'd moved in last month and were relieved to have stumbled into a neighborhood with manners. Mrs. Dalrymple, who had forgiven her lawn gnome's exile by adopting 2 small solar flamingos. Wynne, from Public Works off-duty, in a mariner's cap, holding a plate like evidence he planned to set down once he found the right place. It felt like balance, an invisible scale somewhere finally finding center. On the workbench inside the open garage, a small tableau waited, the fractured folding rule cleaned and laid on a rag, a thin brass pin and a slow-cure epoxy, ready for the surgery I'd been avoiding. The bag I'd stored it in lay folded beside it like the past you keep for context. Every time someone laughed from the lawn, the sound lifted through the garage and made the brass wink. Ruth handed me the napkin. "Sign it at the bottom," she said. "Not your name, homeowner sponsor. Makes it easier for the board to own it without owning you." I signed with the small pleasure of a man who has learned to enjoy dull words that do useful things. Eden took a photo of the napkin and texted it to me like we'd made art. "This will keep a lot of people from a lot of meetings," Ruth said, then set her plate aside and closed her pen with that soft click I'd come to think of as a gavel, putting itself away. From the lawn, Gary's voice floated over, hesitant. He stood at the edge with Princess on a taut leash, not quite in the circle and not quite out. "Looks fine tonight," he said. "Not to me. Kids seem to like it. No one asked him to leave." Tom waved him in with a spare paper plate and the confident kindness of someone who knows a small gesture is a lever. Halfway through the evening, when the sun finally gave up and the first shy inches of glow showed themselves along the fence, a little chorus rose from the kids. Surprised, then delighted, then possessive. They invented a game where your foot had to stay on the light or you were out. The rules were made and remade without argument. The seam looked, if possible, more modest with company. I did laps with my plate, stopping to answer the same 3 questions in friendly variations. No, it doesn't attract bugs. No, it isn't paint. It's inside the repair. Yes, if you put your hand there and look later, it'll glow like you've been touched by a ghost with good intentions. Every reassurance smoothed something in me I hadn't realized was still bristling. The gossip had nowhere to cling. Eden watched me watch people and smiled the way she does when an equation resolves to a clean integer. "You're lighter," she said. "It's strange," I said. "Winning makes very little noise." The grills went quiet. The lanterns held steady. The fence kept its small promise. When the kids finally wore themselves out, somebody turned on a portable speaker low enough not to make anyone glare. Back at the wall, Ruth stacked the napkin on top of my manila folder. "I'll email a clean draft to the board in the morning," she said, "with your stay number and the contractor's note in the appendix." "A guideline with an appendix," I said. "Now we're living." She laughed. "They like attachments. It makes things feel finished." A wind slipped down the street and lifted the corner of the napkin. I pinned it with my cup. For a second, I pictured the boardroom table, the shiny veneer, the stack of agendas, the bowl of mints that taste like sterile good intentions, and the napkin printed clean slid into a packet adopted by voice vote. Order with room for human things. Eden nudged my shoulder toward the open garage. "Your patient's waiting," she said. On the workbench, I set the 2 halves of the rule end to end, a seam as clear as any I'd filled. The brass pin set in like a tiny bone. I wicked epoxy into the joint with a toothpick, wiped the squeeze out, aligned the numbers so the inches still told the truth. The clamp was barely pressure at all, just enough to keep good intentions from slipping while they cured. Eden leaned against the doorjamb, arms folded, the faint glow behind her making a careful outline of her hair. "You're going to hand it to Marla, aren't you?" "It's only right," I said. "We both broke something. She'll think it's a message," Eden said. "It is," I said, turning the joint a fraction to make sure it sat flush. "Just not the kind you post to a chat." I polished the brass with a soft cloth until it caught the porch light and held it. For a moment the rule looked almost new again, older for being mended, which is a better kind of new. I could see Marla's visor in my head, the angle, the pause, the fraction of surprise she'd never admit to. Out in the yard, the kids lay on their backs in a row, debriefing the rules of the game to the stars. Their voices limned the dark. I set the rule on the rag to cure and stood listening, already rehearsing how to say thank you with my hands. Cool dusk gathered on the clubhouse lawn, the way a careful hand gathers a tablecloth, slow smoothing corners. The windows held a last rectangle of sunset copper and peach layered like old paper. I crossed the grass with the folding rule in my palm, brass joint burnished to a soft moon. It had dried, perfectly pin set, inches, true, hinge, honest. Behind us, the fence answered evening with its quiet seam, a faint line the color of patience. Kids hopped the patterns they'd invented, heels barely kissing grass, a game that moved without referees. Marla stood by the azalea's visor, absent hair pulled back with something that wasn't a mission. She looked smaller without the podium, or maybe the podium had made the rest of us small. Eden drifted a few steps behind me with 2 bottles sweating in her hands, and neighbors eddied in little circles. Voices low the way they are when a party pauses to let a smaller ceremony pass through it. "Marla," I said, stopping at a conversational distance that also worked for treaties. "I brought you something." She eyed the rule like it might have an opinion. "You fixed it," she said, not quite asking. "Pinned and epoxied," I said. Numbers lined up. I held it out on my palms the way you offer an object for blessing. "Measure by common standards," I added, realizing on the exhale that I meant both wood and people. Marla didn't take it at first. She looked past me at the fence, at the little procession of children playing a game I didn't know the rules to and didn't need to. "Everyone expects me to be the villain," she said. It wasn't self-pity, it was inventory. "I expected you to protect the neighborhood," I said. "You did just from the wrong thing." She took the rule. The brass caught the last light and held it like a secret told fairly. Her thumb ran along the mended joint. "Your grandfather's—" "He taught me to check twice," I said. Turns out that includes motives. Marla's shoulders shifted a careful unlock. Our first house fell through, she said, voice flat enough to pass inspection. Unpermitted deck seller lied, market turned. Order looked like a rope and I held on. I'm sorry, I said. The words had no polish on them. They didn't need any. Someone inside the clubhouse opened the door and released a curl of coffee smell, this time warm and human. A board member, new too tall for his name tag, stepped out with an envelope and the air of a messenger who didn't mind his errand. Mr. Hale, he called. The board asked me to deliver this. The envelope was plain white, the kind that used to carry birthday money. I slipped a finger under the flap. Notice fine rescinded. One line, no throat clearing, no sermon. The words sat there like a coin returned to your hand when you'd assumed it was gone. I held it up so Marla could read without having to ask. Eden exhaled a little. Finally, that came out like steam from a kettle just shy of singing. From the grass came a cheer that wasn't about us at all. The kids had decided the seam counted as 2 points if you landed both heels on it without wobbling. Their parents clapped anyway. Thank you, I said to Marla, and meant for this and for showing up without armor. We drafted a guideline with Ruth limited to crack infill. Flush no flashing wayfinding language. Nothing mural. Ruth emailed, Marla said, and the corner of her mouth did something almost unprofessional. It reads like she never stopped being city clerk. She never did. I said. Marla turned the rule over and back like a coin that could be heads and tails at once. I'll bring this to the next meeting, she said, as a prop, to remind us what measure is for. Take it, I said. It was mine because it was his. Now it can be ours because it was fixed. For a moment she didn't move. Then she tucked the rule under her arm the way you tuck a program at intermission, and something in her posture loosened. We stood in a silence that didn't need minutes. The clubhouse windows went from copper to mirror to night. Ruth appeared with a paper cup and the small smile she saves for outcomes. There's a motion to adopt your guideline, she said. Voice vote. I foresee unanimous. Even Gary, I asked. Gary abstained on principle, Ruth said. Then asked for a copy. Progress, Eden murmured, handing me one of the sweating bottles. The first swallow had the metallic note of a cap, freshly twisted. I felt ridiculous as it sounds hydrated by permission. The kids' game evolved again. Nora declared the line a river you could only cross by whispering something true. A dozen truths drifted like dandelion fluff. I hate broccoli. I miss Grandma. I cheated at Uno. I'm scared of the deep end. Each confession took the jump and landed intact. The glow made a small oath with the dark. I'll be here while you figure it out. Marla watched Thumb worrying the hinge absent-mindedly. I thought glow meant spectacle, she said almost to herself. I didn't expect it to mean company. Edges are where we decide how to be with each other, I said, and realized I was quoting the dumb sentence I'd typed into a form 2 years before. She looked back at the fence. In the dim, the line was a seam that had chosen repair. The glow has grown on me, she said so soft I wasn't sure if the sentence was meant for me or the grass. Eden laughed under her breath. Careful, she said to Marla. Compliments set precedents. Then minute it, Ruth said, already writing. We drifted toward the folding tables where someone had lined up brownies like bricks. The rescind letter lay in my folder, the guideline napkin beneath it, the contractor's note, and the stay number nested like sensible relatives. People were already talking about the next potluck, about a bench near the mailbox cluster, about who had a spare aerator for the community lawn, and who had a truck for Saturday. The fence glowed on not louder, just more seen. Eden tipped her bottle toward the seam. They'll make you president next, she said too casually to be safe. I took a swallow at exactly the wrong time and did a full graceless choke, sputtering into the back of my hand. It bought me just enough air for a whisper that sounded like a vow and a plea. Don't you even joke about that. The cheer from the lawn rose again as 2 sneakers landed heel to heel on the light with magician certainty. For a second, the clubhouse windows reflected our little street as if it were a postcard someone might keep. And then the night did what nights do. It took us all in and kept the line where it could be found. After the meeting, dusk settled like a cool cloth over the clubhouse lawn. Grills clicked off and the faint resin seam kept its promise along my fence. In Marla's hands, the restored folding rule felt heavier than wood, its polished hinge a small treaty, inches realigned. We didn't change the world. We adjusted how we measure it. A guideline adopted a fine rescinded children inventing rules beside a line that shows up when light is scarce. Communities heal when edges are tended, when procedure serves people, not the other way around. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. If this story rings true, share your own HOA battles or small wins in the comments below.